Hello everyone, today we are here to state the issue of climate change in a country named India, which is located in the continent of Asia. We, as India, are the second largest populated country in the world with around 1.342 billion people living. We have got the fastest growing economy in the world as the external debt stood at $485.6 billion at the end of March in 2016, while the average annual growth rate of around 7% over the past 5 years. India is at 143rd rank in the world ranking position and 33rd on the regional rank. According to the 2015 stats said by the World Bank Group about the urban and rural population, it is believed we do have a high rate of poverty as there is only 32.7% of urban population and 67.253% of rural population. The people living in poverty are living at $1.90 per day, which was stated by the International Poverty Trend. India has the urban population residing in the largest cities such as Mumbai, New Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai, and Bangalore due to the immense businesses running there. With having 29 states and 7 union territories, it is a universal nation with many nations and ethnic groups. There are multicultural people residing here with many different religions, as every person living in India is religious. Most are from the Hindu religion, but there are Muslims, Sikhs, Catholics, Jews, Buddhists, Jains, and a lot more people with other religions, due to which it is called the most religious and ancient country of all times. Just like many states, there are many languages spoken of every state itself. 22 languages are recognized by our Indian constitutions, 31 languages are official languages, and 880 are total spoken, which are in use in the current times. Otherwise, there were 1,652 languages which were identified by the Census of India in 1961. Our country was the last stop in the global travelers' itinerary. On 15 August 1947, we became an independent country as we gained our independence from the British Empire, which is declared a public holiday. While celebrating the Indian Independence Day, we as one nation also celebrate Republic Day on the 26th January, as on that day in 1950 the Constitution of India came into effect. When considering the political side, the current Prime Minister of India is Narendra Modi of the BJP leadership, while the President is Pranab Mukherjee, who is the head of state. Now to introduce what climate change is, we would like to restate. Climate change is a change in the pattern of weather and related changes in oceans, land surfaces, and ice sheets occurring over the time scales of decades or longer, stated by the Australian Academy of Science.
According to the World Bank Group, if global emissions continue at their current rate, India would suffer from 8 major impacts. Extreme heat. India's National Disaster Management Authority states that heat waves occur when temperatures are at least 40 degrees Celsius in the plains or greater than 30 degrees Celsius in hilly regions. In recent years, such temperature spikes have occurred with increasing frequency. For instance, the heat wave of mid-2015 claimed 2,677 lives. Heat waves are expected to occur far more frequently and cover much larger areas. Changing rainfall patterns and increased frequency of extreme weather events. In 2014, researchers at Stanford University found that the intensity of dry and wet spells is increasing, which indicates stronger floods and droughts, while a 2015 report by researchers at the Institute for Atmospheric and Climate Science in Zurich found a correlation between the escalation of climate change and increased instances of extreme weather events. The unpredictable nature of rainfall patterns will greatly affect agriculture. Groundwater depletion and water security. India is home to 16% of the world population, but only 4% of the world's water resources. The World Resources Institute states that 54% of India's groundwater wells have decreased over the past 7 years, and further reductions are expected due to India's growing population and rapidly industrializing economy. Sea level rise. Mumbai has the world's largest population exposed to coastal flooding, with large parts of the city built on reclaimed land below the high tide mark. Rapid and unplanned urbanization further increases the risks of seawater intrusion. Researchers at the LD College of Engineering say India's coastal areas are already suffering from erosion, salinity intrusion, and a loss of biodiversity. Flooding, infrastructure damage, crop failure, mass migration, contaminated drinking water, and spread of disease are all foreseeable. Agriculture and food security. According to the World Bank, around two-thirds of the Indian population depends on agriculture for their livelihood, though its contributions to GDP is declining. Food prices are expected to rise due to growing populations, rising incomes, and greater demand for biofuels. Water scarcity, rising temperatures, and intrusion of seawater would threaten crop yields, jeopardizing food security. By 2050, India may need to import more than twice the amount of food grain than would be required without climate change. Energy security. Climate change would greatly affect hydropower and thermal power generation. Both depend on water supplies, and thermal power plants need a constant supply of fresh, cool water. Inability to use these power sources would cause India to rely more on coal, which would worsen air pollution. Increasing variability and long-term decreases in river flows pose a major challenge to hydropower plants and increase risk of damage from climate-related natural disasters. Decreases in the availability of water and increases in temperature will pose major risk factors to thermal power generation. Health. Climate change is expected to increase malnutrition and related health disorders. The World Bank estimates child stunting to increase by 35% by 2050 compared to a scenario without climate change. Malaria and diarrheal infections are likely to spread into areas where colder temperatures had previously limited transmission, resulting in a substantial rise in mortality. Conflict. The Indus and Ganges Brahmaputra Meghna basins are major transboundary rivers, and increasing demand for water is already leading to internal and international tensions over water sharing. How has India contributed to climate change? Through the use of coal. India's contributions to climate change are aggravated by its growing population, rapid industrialization, and pursuit of economic growth. According to the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, coal-fired power plants cause one-third of global emissions and account for roughly 47% of India's CO2 emissions. Roughly 300 million Indians do not have access to electricity, and coal is a cheap way to provide it to them. Unfortunately, this results in higher emissions of greenhouse gases. Deforestation. Deforestation occurs for agricultural reasons, commercial logging, mining, urbanization, and industrialization. Often the slash and burn technique is used, which increases CO2 concentration in the atmosphere and contributes to climate change. However, despite being the fourth largest carbon emitter, India continues to be far behind the other three top big emitters in terms of per capita emissions.
With its population of 1.3 billion people, India has the world's fourth largest carbon emitter. In 2015, we were introduced to the Paris Agreement, which was the world's first comprehensive climate agreement, with the purpose of peaking greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible to achieve a balance between sources and sinks of greenhouse gases in the second half of the century. This requires countries to make building commitments to curb carbon dioxide emissions to keep global average temperatures from rising. India's emissions are relatively low compared to those of other major economies. India accounts for only 4% of global cumulative energy-related emissions since 1850, compared to 16% and 50% for the US and China. In 2009, the BASIC Group was formed, which is a group of countries consisting of Brazil, South Africa, China, and India, and we represent a unified voice of developing countries. This could be seen that we are agreeing and in an alliance which has enabled us to closely coordinate with one another and protest about how our concerns were not being heard by developed countries. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions in major emerging economies such as the BASIC Group implements governing and market-based policy instruments across their economies, and we, along with the other BASIC countries, are seeking to promote cleaner technologies and behaviour change while also promoting economic development and growth. Due to India being a developing country, a lot of energy is needed, and therefore we are already pushing developed countries to boost their climate. As a country, we have emerged as an essential player in climate talks. supporting developing country demands that the rich take the lead in cutting emissions and providing more money for poor countries. But desperate for a strong deal to protect from the effects of climate change, we are also supporting the US principle that all countries should act upon this.
Climate change is a major global challenge, but climate change is not of our making. It is the result of a global warming that came from the prosperity and progress of an industrial age.
Our Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, has launched an international solar alliance of over 120 countries with the French President at the Paris COP21 Climate Summit. Modi described the solar alliance as the sunrise of new hope, not just for clean energy but for villages and homes still in darkness, for mornings and evenings filled with a clear view of the glory of the sun. Our government is investing an initial $30 million in setting up the alliance's headquarters in India, as by 2030 we are projected to be the world's most populous with 1.45 billion people. Whilst all this is happening, we still disagree, and Modi feels strongly that developed countries are protecting their lifestyle, while developing countries are negotiating for survival, and that there must be a space for people to live a decent life too. He is implying that developed countries are the ones to blame for global warming. As they are so industrialised, they are the ones that are polluting, therefore they should fix the issue. He quotes, "To understand India's position, you must realise that 300 million people live under $1 a day and have no electricity, and that 700 million people depend on climate-sensitive moonspring pattern agriculture."
At the third conference of the parties in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was accepted as the world's inaugural international agreement that sets compulsory targets for industrialised countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. However, since that time, discussions have continued to be unsuccessful in creating a global agreement, which is in large part due to disagreements amongst developing and industrialised countries regarding responsibilities of emission reduction. This led to the Durban Conference, also known as the 17th Conference of the Parties, being held from the 28th of November to the 9th of December 2011. In Durban, an agreement was reached called the Platform for Enhanced Action, which required all major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions to set legally binding emissions reductions targets by 2015. Our delegates objected to the wording of an early draft of the agreement which contained the phrase legally binding. A compromise was eventually reached amongst all involved, and the wording was changed to a protocol, legal instrument, or an agreed outcome with legal force under the convention applicable to all parties. The agreement was required to be developed by 2015 and implemented in 2020. We are opposed to mandated emission cuts for all, as the industrialised countries have contributed the most to emissions and should be responsible for emission reduction, whilst developing countries, such as ourselves, should alternatively work towards reducing poverty. In explaining our stance of opposing legally binding emission targets, our negotiator reported she could not sign away the rights of 1.2 billion people and many other people in the developing world by agreeing to something that could potentially hinder the development of these countries' economies, including our own. In saying this, we have implemented a number of strategies to assist with slowing down climate change. The Low Carbon Technology Partnerships Initiatives is one of those strategies from a business perspective. The initiative raises awareness about climate change and educates large companies regarding the necessity to control and limit the amount of pollution and emissions we are causing as a country.
In that you cannot deprive your nation and earth of natural resources, so you have no right to take more than what you can give back to the society. So from that context, it gives a very good platform to share what India and companies like us are doing in spreading more and more sustainable uses of energy, a sustainable way of functioning, and increasing that awareness not just in India but at global platform.
Now moving on to our community initiatives. Some farmers have declined the use of chemical fertilisation and have instead opted to solely utilise natural resources that are sourced from the local community for compost. Not only does this have a beneficial effect on our rural citizens' health and assist to prevent climate change, inner cities are also starting to take notice with the demand for organic food growing. Another one of our initiatives is that by 2019 we are aiming to replace all incandescent bulbs with LED bulbs. An example of this is the Andhra Pradesh government, who are helping to promote the LED lighting program by providing LED bulbs, which are usually 500 rupees, for 10 rupees, along with the return of their used incandescent bulbs. The recipients then reimburse the distribution companies by contributing an affordable monthly payment until the cost has been rectified. Another one of our strategies is the Lighting a Billion Lives initiative. Since 2007, we have been bringing affordable energy to our citizens who do not otherwise have access to electricity. We have been able to achieve this through a government incentive plan offering solar plates and battery units to citizens for $100 each, when the units are actually $200 each. Following the success of the solar park in the Thar Desert, which happens to be the largest on the continent, more than 20 solar parks are being developed across our wastelands and deserts. Another of our solar projects is on the Narmada Canal in Gujarat. This project is the first of its kind in the world, saving millions of litres of water from evaporation. In 2005, we built and implemented the bus rapid transit system, which is environmentally sound and reduces the use of other vehicles on the roads. As of 2015, 25% of road users are now utilising the bus rapid transit system, and emissions have been reduced by 25%, with the aim of a further 25% reduction within the next 15 to 20 years. As of April 2017, we reaffirmed our commitment to addressing the challenges brought about by climate change and implementing the Paris Climate Change Agreement. In partnership with the Australian Government, we agreed that energy will continue to be an integral aspect of our future relationship. The Australian Prime Minister has congratulated our leadership in this space by developing and implementing the International Solar Alliance.